Hi, gentlemen. I was in the middle of making a completely different video where I got a response today that really hit me, and I really felt the need to share it. It was a comment that speaks volumes, and I love red pill wisdom being spread around, especially from people that can convey an important idea far better than I ever could, predominantly because they've had such potent empirical experience in their lives. In an older video of mine called Truth is Consistent, where I posited that the truest way to see reality out there is predominantly from trusting your own life empirically, then from the things around you, objectively. Then you listen to the drums out there after that. Your reality is the most important. Then the rest of the world, studies, laws, unfairness, media, politics, all that sort of stuff. And then weighing up all the commonalities, weighing everything out, sifting all that out in the front of your brain pan. And then that should tell you what's most likely true. Now, to the point of this video and why I felt compelled to make it, because it needs to be shared, I think. I had a beautiful and powerful comment left under one of my recent videos called Ultimatums and the Importance of Defending Your Values by a person called A.U. That doesn't reflect my lived experience, sure, but I've seen aspects of what he talked about in my personal life as well as with people I know, and it's not uncommon. It's actually starting to become the norm. It's a typical story of a man trying to do the right thing in his life, less so for himself, but more so for everyone else and society and the human race. The man trying to do the right thing only to get walked over because it's never enough of the right thing. Now listen, it's not a story of how men feel subjectively in relationships. This is a difference, like many women might complain about. It's a story of what actually happens to men objectively and really in life. And the reprehensible attitude of these supposedly loving people around these sacrificial men in their personal lives who frankly act like trolls in social media, only it's in the actual lives of these men themselves. Imagine that. The following story I'm about to read only describes the extreme and sad story of how men are exploited. But the story itself, I'll remind you, is typically common as a narrative. Basically, it's the unappreciated racehorse who gets shot when he hurts his leg. I'll read the comment from AU out word for word because it describes so much of why men are going their own way, away from traditional lives that our forefathers had lived. And even worse, often now, just simply women at all. He begins, "Your talk about giving. I watched my father give and give and give to women until he quite literally ended up homeless. He gave my mum gifts during their marriage on holidays, and she was rarely appreciative or thankful. In fact, her general reaction would be to lecture him on how they didn't have the money or he should have saved the money instead. As a kid, I always wondered, how come Daddy didn't make Mummy happy with his gifts? I'm always happy and thankful when I get a gift, even if it's a gift I don't like." Yeah, humbleness isn't as common amongst females as it is amongst men. One only has to hear the common stories of men shopping for engagement rings. And the clerk over the counter says, well, your fiancé can always return it if it's not what she likes. Anyway, after the divorce, I watched him enact this same broken strategy with other women who sucked him dry, hundreds and thousands at a time. Jesus, this sounds like a hard-working man. And I would ask him, why are you giving these random women money? I never see these women around here. You don't date them. You don't f them. And what are they giving you in return? As a teenager, I didn't understand. I remember even my mum, after the divorce, manipulating him in order to get him to give her more money than just child support and alimony. And he always did. Eventually, my father ended up homeless on the streets the last 7 years of his life. When my mum would talk about my father, she would say, "Oh, that's too bad." Like you talk about your car getting muddy right after having washed it. But did she give him $1 back? Nope. Did any of those random females that sucked him dry after the divorce show up to visit him, give him food, help him at all? Nope. Who was there, soaking in his poverty, seeing the crabs on his flesh from having been beaten up, hugging him, and a half hour later while driving home still being able to smell the horror of this repulsive odour on my clothes? Me. Even though he had given up on himself and life, I could never find the heart to give up on him like everyone else. Yeah. And who was everyone else? Yeah. I had relatives ashamed of him and his condition. This is what annoys me. People ashamed to be associated with somebody who's destitute and weak. This kind of tells you where empathy is lacking. So I had relatives ashamed of him and his condition tell me I shouldn't visit him after all he'd done to me as a child, that I had done enough. No one expected me to see him. I would always answer these statements the same way. He's my dad. He's the only one I'll ever have. This is gut-wrenching. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. If I don't laugh, I'd fucking flip this table. I even tried unsuccessfully to show him that life was great and you could move on, build a new life. I took on great challenges and sought recognition in things I did in my 20s just to show him, to hopefully lend him my strength and my courage at the time. But he died of lung cancer from smoking at 54. His stiff shell still wearing his wedding band. Oh, God. Fucking hell. Now at 45, and with hindsight, I see my father as a man who had no sense of value for himself. He relied on the world around him to give him his so sought-after value. His giving was a desperate cry for someone, anyone, just to love him. Instead, he was used, dispensed of, and ignored, and he became a liability or was no longer useful. Even to this day, my mother, who still lives off my father's money by being able to receive his social security in old age, still rarely has anything good to say about him. She's still stuck being the victim, and he's still the monster. Guess who I am? The monster's son. Yet even after death, he still hasn't stopped giving, has he? And my mother, so determined in her own logic, thinks my reasons for never marrying a woman has everything to do with my father and not her. Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah, where does men's anger come from, I wonder? The worst lies are the lies we tell ourselves, and she'd likely carry that lie to the grave, like my dad wore their ring to the grave. Fuck, that was some beautiful writing and really hit where it mattered. Thanks so much for sharing that gut-wrenching story, AU. That was heavy and meaningful, and I think necessary for everyone who'd watch this video to hear, if they weren't privileged enough to read it under the video. Look, I know I'm lucky in many ways to have avoided the pitfalls that other men have had to experience, like your life perhaps, but I also know happily married friends of mine, I mean truly happily married men, who'd probably consider themselves grateful for not living my life. That's fine. They've had their own luck. But that luck out there in the world is shrinking today. My point here is even my friends, and virtually any man I'd randomly pick off the street, they wouldn't listen to the story I just told and think, oh, come on, human, you're going a bit too far, aren't you? You're making that story up. No, they would exhale sympathetically like I did, and concede that, unfortunately, that story is all too familiar and sadly the norm. AU's personal story only describes the ends of a very common who cares about men bell curve that men face. That's just the extreme of a very common middle. When a man these days has to begrudgingly put down his romantic future and dreams, like a sick dog he loves, because it's just the right thing to do today, to forgo that kind of happiness, that potential happiness that our forefathers might have had, then it's easy to see why many men are facing an unfamiliar void today that their fathers and grandfathers never had to face. The story I just told used to be an extreme tale of bad luck. Now it's common enough to just avoid a similar probabilistic outcome in your own life. You know, guys get married these days and the pedestrian male will say, "Man, are you sure?" As I mentioned in a previous video of mine, Sell Marriage to Me, link below, sane men who might genuinely want kids and a loving wife don't avoid marriage because it's just too risky. These days, these men avoid it because the odds of success are heavily outweighed by fucking failure. Even if he does everything right, like AU's father, even to the immolating degree that AU's dad sacrificed his life for. That is what men are scared to fucking death of today. Losing everything they genuinely love and have put so much of their lives in for. And they've done their very best to keep, even sacrificially so, where they barely expect anything back. And everyone and everything takes it away from this man with a laugh and a who gives a fuck. Now, this isn't an excuse to get angry or upset about women or gynocentrism or how your ex treated you. Look, when you've moved past the anger and resignation, just accept that it's no longer a traditional man's world as it stands today. Men today simply need to realize that self-actualization is their only way toward anything meaningful in their lives, in whatever way moves you and whatever way you discover for you alone, because you can't rely on the script of yesterday, today anymore. Treat each other well, gentlemen, and let AU's tale be a reminder of how important your own psychology and self-respect is today, and just to accept things as they are. It may be the only thing that saves you in the end, gentlemen. Santa Claus doesn't exist. Keep swinging, gentlemen. I'll talk to you later.